And welcome to our Halloween edition of Cardinal Film Fights. I am your host, Mark Rollins, but today I am the Riddler. I am not a leprechaun, as I was mistaken for on the way here. But yes, with me today we have Brandon, also known as Dumbledore. We have Hunter, also known as Evil Morty. And we have Carly, who is Two-Face or Jekyll Hyde thing. You know, whatever floats your boat. So today, before I start, if you came here for a certain fight, click in the description below. And I'll introduce the rest of our crew that's with us continuously. We can't get rid of them. We've tried. We got our fact checker, Von Storm, back there. He's Von Storm. That's all he needs to be. We have our time and scorekeeper Paige there at the ready with that nice little bell. Love those bells. And so I'm just going to explain what we do here today. So we're going to have 4 questions that I'm going to arrange in a random order, like on the fly, because that's how can you get more random than that. The process is going to be, you're going to have a 60-second intro, so kind of where you introduce why you chose what you chose and defending its merits, followed by a 5-minute open forum where you build yourselves up, break each other down, and then you'll finish off with a 30-second conclusion in which you just kind of recap your arguments and build your best case again. Scoring is based by ranking, so first place gets 3 points, second place 2 points, and third place 1 point. But in the 4th question, we double all those points, so everybody is staying alive, like the Bee Gees. So, without further ado, I'm gonna see if I can ask these questions in a riddle, because I am the Riddler. So, riddle me this, contestants. What or who is the best horror monster of all time? We're going to start with Carly.
Okay, I chose to do Pennywise, or It, but everyone just calls it Pennywise. So the thing about Pennywise is he's iconic, that everyone is instantly recognizing that if they see a clown, they're going to definitely think of Pennywise 90% of the time. And everyone just associates that with horror. So, and it's a recent thing that is getting popularity all the time.
Gotcha. Okay. We'll go right down the line. Hunter, who did you pick for the best horror movie monster of all time?
All right, it's not who did I pick, it's what did I pick. I chose the Xenomorph from the Alien series. I'm arguing that the Xenomorph is the best movie monster of all time due to its incredible effect on pop culture as well as its design as an antagonist, which is unmatched in all cinema history, I'd argue. No other creature has become as ingrained in pop culture as the Xenomorph. It's become so saturated to the point that pretty much everybody knows the basic design of it. So much so to the point that it has made appearances in everything from movies to video games to comics to television. And continues to make appearances to this day outside of the movie franchise that it's a part of.
Gotcha. Nice. And Brandon, who is your best horror movie monster ever?
So my best horror movie monster is the Babadook. And I'm picking the Babadook due to what it really represents. So what it represents is depression and anxiety, and that really shows in the movie. And you can't get rid of it. And that's just a really scary thing for a lot of people with that illness, and it shows in the movie too. And it also has a huge effect on pop culture because apparently it is a symbol for the LGBTQ community now, as of like this summer. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get to it. We are going to start our 5-minute forum.
You got me.
Oh, wait, that's why you made us go out in the hall.
You got me.
You bastards. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew
For
that was
our
coming,
viewing
too.
audience back home, that is what we like to call in the industry as a jump scare. The idea behind that is that we jump because we're scared. We didn't convey that very well.
As most movies don't.
But, I don't think it's so much Stuart's fault as the costume he's wearing. If Bacon is jumping out at me, I'm, come here. I'm welcoming it.
Yeah.
But anywho, you're welcome, Stuart. So, anywho, let's start our 5-minute forum.
Okay. So we can just fight.
Yeah. go
Okay,
ahead.
so the problem with Pennywise, you can kill it. And the Xenomorph, you can kill it. You can kill both of those things. But as shown in the Babadook, you can't kill this. You can't get rid of it. Once it manifests you can make it leave your body, but it's always going to be there, just like depression and anxiety and grief, as the main character has dealt with as her husband died in the movie. And what the Sam, the boy, doesn't understand in the movie. But he knows that you can't get rid of it, so that's why they trap it in the basement at the end of the movie, showing that.
The fact that you can't kill it, though, does that really make it the best? Because I want to argue that as the Xenomorph, everything about its biology is deadly. It's incredibly hard to kill as it is to begin with. It has acidic blood, which makes it especially dangerous in the settings that the Alien franchise normally takes place in, which is space. As well as the fact that it has like the inner jaw and the scorpion's tail. The fact that the main thing that makes the Xenomorph so scary is the fact that it's just a incredible predator to begin with, and as such, I think that that's one of the main things that made it such a huge pop culture icon, what made it so effective in the first place.
And another thing with like the Babadook was in this movie, it's the creature itself is scary, but what you're sort of going for with the representation doesn't make the monster, I mean, it does. The symbolism is definitely the biggest part of the movie, but with the monster itself, most of the scariest things come from the imagery it conveys.
When it comes to the Babadook and Pennywise, though, is it really fair to call it the best of all time when both movies have come out within the last 5 years, with the exception of the original It, of course?
Yeah.
But the new one just came out only a couple of months ago to begin with. Is it really fair to compare that to icons such as Freddy Krueger or, in my case, the Xenomorph? And also, the Babadook can be contained. It can be repressed. As for something like the Xenomorph or Pennywise can't necessarily be contained. It can be killed, but it can't necessarily be contained. And then for the Xenomorph, it's just a force in nature. You can't really stop something like that. It's a scourge.
Well, okay. So I'm going to jump a couple movies. Are you just talking about the one from Alien, the original?
No, I'm talking about the whole
Just the whole
species.
franchise? Well, containment. So, in one of the really bad ones, Alien 4, they had, 2 xenomorphs inside of this plexiglass type thing. I forget what they were doing with it. I think they were studying it. But, they were containing it within there.
I want to remind you, though, that it's a well-known fact that the xenomorphs are known to use their blood to escape. I believe it was either the third or the fourth film. They ended up getting contained, and they broke out by killing one of their own to melt their way out of the cage in the first place.
I'm going to interrupt here really quick. I haven't heard a lot about it going. So, Carly, do you have anything more you want to say about it?
Okay. One of the things that I think really strikes people that makes Pennywise really iconic, especially people thought it was iconic with the 1990s version, and that to a point now that original thing is mostly just laughable because it tries to be scary and nothing works. It's just really funny now. But with the new movie, it actually makes it scary, so people are legitimately citing it for clown fears and stuff now.
Okay, well, one thing I just want to point out, though, is the fact that scary clowns is kind of a bit of a trope to begin with, and Pennywise might be one of the most notable for that. But I would still argue that mine has a bit more pop culture to it, as it's shown up in everything from Family Guy, twice, The Simpsons, 10 separate times, American Dad, Toy Story with one of the games at Pizza Planet, DreamWorks Planet 51. His dog is literally a xenomorph, basically. multiple video games, multiple comics. There's a Batman versus Xenomorph comic, of all things. In fact, to submit to the committee, I have a 9-page list of the different pop culture references there are that cover every single one of those subjects to begin with.
Well, thank you for this evidence. Just a reminder to our viewers, we are now changing to a court serial drama format. That change wasn't announced in our last episode, but we're going to see how it goes. No, not really. That was completely a joke. I hope that was a joke. Anywho, let's do 30-second conclusions. We'll start with Brandon and we'll work our way back.
Okay, so I think the Babadook is the best horror monster of all time for what it represents, for how scary it is in the actual movie. And I believe that it really started this whole back to horror, back to basics monsters again. How they're scary, how the jump scares work, and what it represents brings a whole deeper meaning to what it means. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that.
Okay. On to Hunter.
All right. So it's called the perfect organism for a reason, as it is an embodiment of nature's raw power. Despite humanity's technology or industry, you can't overcome a threat like the Xenomorph. You can only run and pray it won't find you. It's terrifying because it's organic in nature, not a supernatural being or entity. And before the retcons made in Covenant, there was this terrifying notion that this thing could exist somewhere in the cosmos waiting for its next host. One of the issues humans have about imagining alien life is our tendency to only extrapolate off of Earth life. But what makes the Xenomorph so terrifying is that it's based off of actual real-life creatures.
And we'll finish up with Carly.
Another thing with Pennywise is also that it changes to represent your own fears. So it represents more than just the clown trope, scary clown trope. It also can be a zombie or a scary leopard or something. It really can be whatever it wants. And that's what's really terrifying about it.
Okay, Vaughn, any facts to check there?
No.
Okay, back to me. So, does anyone in our staff have any thoughts that they are dying to share? No one? Okay. So.
That's what the comment section is for.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's me then. Okay. You can tell I'm thinking because I'm making mouth noises. I made that joke last episode. I'm hoping it still reads. So, I've decided I'm going to award first place to Hunter, second place to Brandon, and third place to Carly. Hunter, I liked how you had a really strong argument. You have a lot of references in popular culture. And you made a really good case that the Xenomorph is genuinely scary because every part of its body is a weapon and it's a scourge, as you said. Brandon, I'm going to give you second place because I feel like the Babadook is a little too new to kind of declare the best horror movie monster of all time yet, but I think you made a good case in its kind of originality and its connection to real world problems, and that's part of what makes it scary. Carly, I think you had a really great choice. I think it's too early to call Pennywise, this version of Pennywise, the greatest horror monster. You did make a good point in saying that, he can change into other forms, but I think the most popular iteration that we think of is the clown at this point, and chlorophobia. I think it's I hope that's not fear of Clorox. I hope that's fear of clowns. Chlorophobia. Fact check that, Vaughn.
No, it's the fear of green.
Okay, clown phobia.
Sure hope you don't have that.
Yeah, I know. Hope I don't have chlorophobia. Yeah. So, clown phobia is kind of a wide trope to really pinpoint to one clown.
Mark?
At this, yeah.
Okay, so the fear of clowns is colrophobia.
Colrophobia. Okay, so I did a letter inversion there. That's not the end of the world. Okay, does change the meaning of the words. Thank you for catching that, Vaughn, before somebody in the comments did, because they would not have been as nice about it. So, just to recap, first place goes to Hunter, second place Brandon, and third place Carly. So, next question, which I'm going to attempt to ask in the form of the riddle, which is, you know what, it's just going to be riddle me this. I'm starting all these questions with riddle me this. Okay, riddle me this. What non-horror film would be better as a horror movie? We're going to start with Hunter this time.
Yeah, okay, so I chose Pinocchio because honestly, that's like one of the most traumatic movies of my entire life, outside of Notre Dame, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. One of the main things I think makes Pinocchio so freaky is just the fact that its very premise, a walking, talking doll, is literally the stuff of nightmares. In fact, we have multiple movies that we can point to that are actual horror films that kind of paint the idea that I'm talking about, such as The Boy or Chucky or multiple other iterations of the demonic possessed doll. In fact, there is no evidence that Pinocchio is not possessed by a demon. It makes no sense that his nose grows, as that is in and of itself a supernatural question that I do not know anything about. Additionally, just plenty of other plot points about it that are terrifying, like the fact the dude literally gets eaten by a whale. He turns into a donkey at one point, which is weird considering that he's not even a real boy or organic to begin with.
Okay, we'll go to Brandon next.
Okay, so my choice was E.T. the Extraterrestrial. This movie traumatized me as a kid. The intro of it is just surprisingly creepy for what everyone thinks the film is and what it is. It's a nice film. But in the beginning, there's these silent ambient credits. You see all these aliens picking at Earth's greens and stuff like that. And the aliens themselves look definitely creepy, and they're making creepy noises. There's a scene just from the beginning to the part where Elliot brings him into the house. There's the shed where he tosses the ball back. That's stuff you find in horror movies. There's the cornfield scene. That's where Elliot shines a flashlight in him and he makes that weird noise. So I had nightmares about this as a kid, and I have a plan where I can take when he brings him into the home and onward into a horror movie.
Okay, and we'll finish up with Carly.
Okay, so I think I had a different version of this question, as I thought it was what movie works as a horror movie or which one would be better as a horror movie. So I chose Phantom of the Opera because it has a lot of potential to be scarier than what it is. With a lot of talk in that movie is, oh man, this guy is so bad. But most of the kills are just nothing, and there's so much potential for just it to be more in your face and actually worry about the characters. And for most of the franchise for Phantom of the Opera is actually horror, with the 1925 Lon Chaney film being an iconic classic in the genre. So what I think is they had the potential to make a really great horror movie, and they just focus on the love story.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm reevaluating my childhood now. And in the case of Phantom of the Opera, I guess my teen years? No, that was still childhood. I guess watch 2004, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anywho, we're going to go to our 5-minute forum, starting now.
You're aware that Stephen King's E.T. was originally going to be a horror film in the first place before that got scrapped, correct?
Stephen King?
Oh, did I say Stephen King? Steven Spielberg. I meant to say Steven Spielberg.
Oh, yeah. I read that,
Which is one of the reasons why it's so darn creepy in the first place, truth be told.
Yeah. I think it would definitely work better as one. They could make it like Alien, how he's just picking them off one by one after Elliot brings them into the house. He could befriend them. And
Are you talking about the kids, or you're talking about the Skittles?
They were Reese's Pieces.
Oh, Reese's
yeah.
Pieces.
But
it's been a while.
Well, he could bring him in, and then E.T.'s acting all nice, but then he starts picking everybody off one by one. Remember when he's in the stuffed animal thing, and his mom's walking around? Like, that could be a jump scare, And then in my nightmares, he would always bite my leg. He could do that in the movie because he can run so fast. Like, you've seen him run from the government in the movie. He runs so fast. Picks off the government one by one. That's how it works.
Picks off the government one by one.
Yeah.
So, responses to that, or cases for your own movie?
I mean, I don't think that E.T. could be improved by making it more horror, because I feel like
a classic as
it is such a classic that any changes would be sort of detrimental to the story, and just how the feelings that go along with it. It was made as a classic for a reason, with just how it subverts you think this thing is bad, but it's actually good, you know?
I feel like it turned into a horror movie. It would be more like one of those like comedies that aren't necessarily like, it's not meant to be funny because it's supposed to be a horror movie, but I feel like it would unintentionally be that. Like, I can't get the image out of my head of like the bikes going over the moon. Like, how would that turn into a horror set piece?
Well, I wouldn't even be in it.
That wouldn't even be in it.
No, because
That's like one of the most
Elliot's because
iconic
they're
moments of the
trying to
film,
kill
though.
him. They're not trying
Is
to
it
bring
really
him home.
E.T. without that though?
It's supposed to be a horror movie before.
Okay.
I was going to say something else, but I forgot.
Okay, well, I didn't. So, Pinocchio. Yeah, no. Honestly, do think that this is one of the most terrifying things ever because while it is a Disney classic and while it is beloved by many, I also think that it's quite honestly one of the most disturbing that they have inside their repertoire. I pray to God that they never make a live-action version of Pinocchio because Beauty and the Beast was already in the uncanny valley as it is. I'm not sure if I can really handle Pinocchio walking around in live action as it is. I would not be able to get over that, and I think it would actually traumatize plenty of children, and I think that's one of the main reasons why, to my knowledge, Disney hasn't confirmed that they're going to do that movie yet, at least, as live action.
Gotcha. Let's hear more about Phantom of the Opera.
Well, another thing that, especially with one of the biggest deaths in the movie is the Joseph Bouquet hanging scene during the ballet. And a lot that at some points you can see that as horror inspired, especially with the rising score behind it. And if other deaths within the movie were as dramatic as it would probably make it a lot better.
So, responses to that?
I don't know anything about Phantom of the Opera, so I can't really argue.
So you're talking about like the one from
The 2004 one.
The 2004 one, okay. I don't know. Same with same with you, Hunter. I'm not huge on Phantom of the Opera.
That's what I feel like it'd make it better for horror things, because a lot of people get pushed away from it because people just see it as like a love story, and it honestly would work better as horror.
I mean, it was written that way before, and it's a musical too. The 2004 one is the musical one too, so you'd have to completely take out the musical aspect of it.
Actually, to be honest, I think I'd totally be down for a horror musical. I've never seen that happen before. I'd totally be down for that.
Like Joel Schumacher he added in a lot of like more action sequences, so I feel like if he would have made it more horror sequences instead, like he showed he wasn't afraid of changing it a little to fit a genre. So you might as well make it within the franchise's history.
Oh no, I feel like it could be that way for E.T. too. I mean, we've seen Steven Spielberg do horror before with Poltergeist. He didn't direct it, but he produced it and he had a big hand on it.
Okay. So, this time we'll start with Carly in our 30-second rebuttal.
Phantom of the Opera should have had a more horror-themed thing to it because it has a history in the movies as a horror, and Joel Schumacher wasn't afraid of making it into an action movie instead of just pure romance, so he could have added horror instead.
Okay. We'll next go to Brandon.
Well, I feel like E.T. could be better as a horror movie because, Well, it was originally that way. Steven Spielberg has done horror before with Poltergeist. He could easily do it with E.T. since the intro already sets that up, how scary it is. And the cornfield scene, again, already scary. And you could easily just make E.T. a psycho killer, picking off the government one by one.
And we'll finish up.
Went from the children to the government.
Well, because at the end, the government is, like, getting them.
We'll finish up with Hunter.
All right, so I think Pinocchio has like all the perfect ingredients for being an awesome horror movie. It has that creepy ass doll trope that we see in so many other horror films. In a lot of cases, to much success. There's kidnapping in it. The dude ends up getting turned into a donkey at one point. He watches children in front of him get turned into a donkey and get punished for their sins. Basically, he gets eaten by a whale. He barely escapes death. Plenty to
Okay.
build off of.
Any facts to be checked, Vaughn?
None.
Any pressing opinion? Oh, Stuart's got opinions.
Got some fun facts for you.
Oh, fun facts here.
So, fun fact for E.T., I think they tried to get Harrison Ford to play the teacher or Elliot's school when during that frog scene. Just fun fact. Also, if you're looking for a horror musical, Sweeney Todd, I think that kind of counts. And just a personal thought, I still hold that the donkey scene at Pleasure Island, like, that was probably the most traumatic thing. Like, just
Honestly,
like
though.
the voice actor probably made it the way it was just because the reactions
yes.
of that, like, just traumatized.
With how
me, but-
raspy his voice is
Yeah.
during that entire scene, no.
But those are my thoughts.
Okay. Also, I'd like to point out Little Shop of Horrors is another horror
Yeah.
musical.
Oh, I need to see that. I keep remembering.
It's a
about
good it's a good musical. Good rock musical.
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Okay. So, Carly, I'm going to give you first place because I feel like your biggest argument came when neither Hunter nor Brandon could really argue against Phantom of the Opera because they hadn't seen it. So I feel like your movie, just by that, demonstrates that it would benefit best from a change in genre, maybe. And I feel like you gave a lot of good points on how it already had more added action, and you just horror's a hop, skip, and a jump away from that. Also, you know, the killings were pretty gruesome, like with the hanging in the middle of a show. You know, that just kind of ruined everybody's night at the opera, you know. So, Hunter, I'm going to give you second place because that donkey scene is traumatic as fuck. It is. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, like, it's scary. I mean, that alone still scares me to this day. I don't think I've ever seen Pinocchio more than once, actually, because
Yeah.
the reason I'm giving you second place is because it's an iconic classic Disney movie already, so it's kind of hard to say if it would do better as in the horror movie genre because Disney has kind of cemented it as a children's classic. You know Disney is good when they can sell turning kids into donkeys as a children's classic. You know their marketing team is working their butts off.
Let them make that live action, and then we can have this conversation.
Yeah, then we
again.
can have this conversation. And then Brandon, I'm gonna have to give you third place just because you had a good argument in that E.T. started out as a horror movie, but I didn't really get the sense that it would be made better if it was changed from its current state to a horror movie because a lot of the scenes in it are very cute and iconic. Like the whole moon thing is like a whole studio logo, like in itself. And so I feel like it would be very interesting to see as a horror movie, but I'm not sure if it would gain the most improvement from being made into a horror movie. So to recap, for this round, Carly gets first place, Hunter gets second, and Brandon gets third. So, it's really hard to grab things in these gloves. Let me just, like, if you've seen me drop my pen like 3 times, it is because these gloves are really slippery.
Get a grip.
I will. And that's, yeah. Are you trying to tell me a joke? I'm the Riddler. Tell me a riddle, and then
Your whole character's a joke. There's a reason that you were never in one of the Batman films. None of the ones that anybody actually saw.
Jim Carrey's performance in Batman Forever, and in the 1966 Batman, Frank Gorshin.
I struck a chord.
See me after the show. Okay.
Film fights.
So, yeah.
Behind
we're
the
Literally.
scenes.
We're really putting the fight in the film fight application. I'm just saying, who brought a big hefty stick here, Hunter? Let's think this through, but who brought a big...
It's not who brings the biggest stick.
Riddle me
Right.
this! What is the best horror movie within the last 5 years? Okay, who hasn't started? Hunter, have you? I don't think you've started before with the intros yet, have you?
Did I? I honestly don't know.
I don't think you did. I'm going to say you didn't. Okay, we're going to start with Hunter with the intro.
Okay. Well, I'm arguing It Follows, as it is one of the best horror films of the last 5 years, if not the decade, in my honest opinion, because of its terrifying and unfortunately culturally relevant after the recent allegations against Weinstein and other such sexual scandals. It has a very relevant concept. Basically, it's about sexual abuse and being a survivor of sexual abuse. But outside of its concept, it also has like a really amazing score and just cinematography in general. It's a gorgeous film to watch in every sense of the word, honestly. The acting is fantastic. The way that the shots are set up are just absolutely beautiful. It also has this timeless quality that honestly I think makes it almost an instant classic in a lot of horror films as a genre, in all honesty. I think that it's a very good addition to it, and as such, I think it's one of the best examples of the renaissance of the genre that we've seen over the last couple of years.
Gotcha. We'll go to Carly next.
Okay, I chose It. It is just a powerhouse of a film that proves that a horror movie can be a blockbuster as well, and it really sort of revitalized interest within the common masses of people that our movies are just a good way to go about, can be a good time, and you don't have to think really hard and deep about it. You can just enjoy it, get a bucket of popcorn, and get scared all in one shot.
All right. And we will finish with Brandon.
So I think that The Babadook is the best horror movie within the last 5 years because of its amazing acting, the camera work, and the monster itself again, and what it symbolizes, grief, depression, because not a lot, I can't really think of any horror movies where a monster symbolizes the grief that a character has gone through, and where you can contain it, and how you learn to contain it. So a lot of the camera work is very good in this movie. They set up the characters super early and spend a lot of time with these characters. They really drive them inside your head, and it makes you really care for them. And the whole movie, it really relies on silence. There's not a lot of loud noises with the jump scares or anything. There's not a lot of jump scares either. And it really gets under your skin as you watch this whole movie.
All right. This should be an interesting fight. Let's start our 5-minute forum.
So I recently saw it, and one of the problems I had with it that I can just think of from the top of my head were the scares. So while some scenes were like, the images were disturbing, like when he pops out of the screen, but the problem is every time something was going to happen, there's just this loud noise every single time, and it got super predictable whenever there was going to be a scare, so you were ready for it, and that just really bugged me about it, that I can think from the top of my head about.
Response to that?
I feel like it did have a lot of jump scares, but I feel like that sort of made it jump scares are a problem with the horror movies, but I think it still worked it with it, because while it did have the jump scares, it also had a sort of foreboding with it as well. Like, you sensed that, you felt what the characters were feeling along the way, and you sort of relayed with them that they are scared of it. And then you also have the human antagonist as well, with the girl's father and the bully, and those show that you can have multiple antagonists in a film. It doesn't have to be just about the monster. And then a problem I had with It Follows was one of the most distracting things for me was the dialogue kept on switching between really like normal talking and then like really sort of a heightened sort of talking, like with what you get with like some sort of art films, like especially like before like big events, like the first time she sees the monster and right before the big confrontation in the pool. Like there's just these random conversations that have no sort of pertinence to the story whatsoever. But
Give me an example.
like they have like when they're walking to the pool, there's a conversation they have about sort of, I'm trying to think of like quotes, but is summed up is like talking about how their parents wouldn't let them go past this city line because it wasn't the suburbs anymore, and like racism is a shitty thing. Like it is an important conversation to have, but it just felt really out of place.
Okay, I think it's very important to mention the dialogue. I'm kind of glad that you brought that up because the whole film, like I said, is about sexual abuse and sexual assault to begin with. In a lot of ways, it's about losing your innocence, basically. Like when she first gets the monster chasing after her, there's this really tender and sweet moment where she's like lying in the car after her first time and she's like contemplating what she expected from it and how it kind of, she expected to like be with a cute boy and have all these lovely things happen. And it's really sweet and tender, but that's broken because as she's having this monologue with herself, her lover is in the back performing a chloroform rag to knock her out, basically, to go ahead and try and show her the horrible thing that he just unleashed on her in the first place. So I think it's really important to kind of note that the dialogue, I don't think so much is artsy as I think it is it does a good job like kind of exploring the ideas of like losing your innocence and going outside of your boundaries. I mean, she does a lot of different acts of desperation that show her like need to get rid of this creature, and the only way you can get rid of it is to pass it on to someone else. There's even the movie doesn't spell everything out for you. In fact, there's this one specific part where it is hinted that she basically has a foursome with bunch of random strangers in order to get rid of it in the first place. And it works for a short time, but then it starts coming after her again because obviously that monster had killed them in the first place.
Gotcha. I'm going to interrupt because I want to hear a little more about the Babadook before we run out of time.
So a problem with it follows, it really only follows like one sort of scare, like the monster coming, whatever it is, the monster coming and attacking. But the whole movie of the Babadook, it's psychological. It really gets under your skin, and you're really on nerve whenever something is going to happen. Like when the Babadook first possesses the mom, you don't know when it's going to happen, but you know it's going to happen, and you're just waiting for it, and it really...
I think one of the terrifying things about the creature from It Follows, though, is the fact that it can take the form of anyone. So you actually, what you're saying about how it's like one specific scare where it's just constantly coming at you, the problem is it makes you paranoid because you don't know who could possibly be this creature in the first place.
Well, the Babadook can too. It manifested the body of the wife's husband and Sam's mom, her dad.
Okay, we're going to do 30-second rebuttals, and we'll start with Brandon.
So I believe The Babadook is the best horror movie within the last 5 years because of the camera work, the acting, the characters, the scares, how it really gets under your skin, how it's psychological, and not a lot of other movies really do that. Again, they had these really unique camera choices, like when the Babadook was getting closer, the camera would move closer, but it would never show the Babadook until only those two scenes when it was being possessed. And just the impact it had on being a symbol for grief and depression.
Okay. We're going to go next to Hunter.
Overall, It Follows is one of the best, most interesting horror experiments in decades, and it's not just because of its concept, cinematography, beautiful score, which I want to highlight that especially. Go watch the movie, if for nothing else, the score. And overarching themes that make it a stellar and amazing film, if not an outright piece of art like I would consider it to be. It's available on Netflix. I'm just going to tell you guys to go watch it right now. Babadook's also available on Netflix, but watch my movie first because honestly, I think it's better.
And Carly.
Okay. It has many interesting things in how it can shift to... So it has many different kinds of scares. Even if like, I'm not really scared of clowns, but some of the other scares really got me. And then it has a good mix of antagonists with the humans and the monsters, and then it also has likable heroes, so you actually feel for what they're really going through.
Okay, any facts to check Vaughn?
None.
I just want to make a point that I do care about Vaughn's opinions too. I don't just use them to get me my facts, but that's an off-screen thing. Anybody pressing to have input? Just me. I guess I'm the only one pressing to have input. Okay, for this one, I'm going to give first place to Hunter, second place to Brandon, and third place to Carly. Hunter, I'm giving you first place because I feel like you had the most attacks on you, but you defended them really well with specific examples. I think you made it apparent that while It Follows does have kind of a shift in dialogue, it is necessary to tell the story that is needed to be. Brandon, I think you had a really good argument with the Babadook. I feel like you were able to keep up with Hunter pretty well in terms of that the Babadook represents more than the actual monster itself, and that's kind of the horror in there. I just feel like that we didn't get to really fully explore the full extent of your argument there. And then Carly, I feel like it just wasn't fully explored to the fullest potential. I think you made a good point that it does have a good mix of, interesting antagonists but likable protagonists. I just think a little more from that would have pushed it a little further. Awesome. So for this round, I'm going to give first place to Hunter, second place to Brandon, and third place to Carly. Now, riddle me this. What is the best horror movie / franchise tainted by crappy sequels? We're going to start with Brandon.
Okay, so the one I chose, best horror movie tainted by crappy sequels, was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This movie came out all the way back in 1974. This was essentially the first slasher horror movie that you found with gruesome imagery, good acting, surprisingly, by the people that they found, because this movie was on such a low budget. And it has, Texas 2, Texas 3, 4, a remake, and Texas 3D. So it has 3 sequels, 1 remake. And then the Texas 3D was, they're now calling it like the sequel. So all those movies are just obsolete now in the canon. I mean, you can watch them. And only 2 of them were directed by the one who directed Texas Chainsaw. And they're so unlike the original that they're just unwatchable, and it makes you, they're just forgettable. Yeah.
Next, we'll go to Carly.
I chose the Friday the 13th franchise because after around 10 sequels and a reboot, what really tainted the franchise is not exactly that the formula got old, but they sort of changed it to be more like campy and trying to be funny while still trying to just make the deaths more gruesome and add more nudity instead of trying to make you feel more for the characters and actually worry. I mean, most of them are going to die, but you still should feel like a little tiny thing for them. And then also it didn't focus on the scares, especially with the first 2 Fridays when they are mainly from the killer's perspective to just, yeah.
And we'll finish off with Hunter.
All right, so I chose Blair Witch, and the reason I'm choosing that is not so much because it is a good film, but more along the lines of it is a very significant film, and that's what makes it outstanding in the first place, as it's kind of one of the first films to help usher in and make relevant the found footage genre, which is one of the biggest things inside of horror in a lot of cases. obviously there are plenty of different franchises I could name that a lot of people know because of the fact that it's a found horror or found footage in the first place. And to be honest, the sequels didn't really stand a chance to begin with that kind of significance. But I mean, people usually don't even know that there is a sequel aside from the soft reboot / the film that came out last year.
Gotcha. Okay, let's start our 5-minute forum.
So the thing that's different from the Blair Witch compared to Friday the 13th and Texas Chainsaw, it only has 2 sequels, but the one that just came out is a remake, right?
It's like a soft reboot. It's technically a sequel.
Yeah, I mean it only has 2, so I wouldn't really call it tainting. Like it's tainted the franchise.
If you look at the Metacritic scores, though,
I mean, you could
there's
look
a
at
reason people don't
you
think
could look
about
at
them.
Metacritic scores for a lot, like especially Texas 3 and 4. They're very, very low. Same with Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay, but quick question: both of your series have had a lot of spin-offs. To begin with, does the fact that they continue to keep on making crap movies outside of the first few in the first place really mean much when mine only has 2 to begin with? It asks what was the best horror movie / franchise tainted by crappy sequels. I think mine's probably one of the most relevant and, for lack of a better term, important. Meanwhile, the 2 of yours continue to just kind of push out crap, despite the fact that it's still
I don't know,
wasn't
because
exactly at its best to begin with.
I feel like with the sorry, but I feel like with the Blair Witch, the sequels mainly just sort of showed us what was wrong with the premise. Sorry, but it just sort of showed us that it was sort of boring without the found footage sort of thing with it. And I think really the most interesting thing about the Blair Witch was just the found footage thing and not necessarily the movie itself. So I don't think it could necessarily taint it. It just showed us that it's just a new thing that got boring.
Yeah,
Again,
what made Blair Witch important was that it created something new again, but from an already dying genre because there were so many movies. I mean, like right now the found footage genre is dying. It's not good anymore. I mean, you've seen all the Paranormal Activity movies, but what started the genre that was dying before the Blair Witch was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Again, it came out in 1974. It was like the first one, and people still love it. But its sequels followed the same exact plot, like Friday the 13th and like the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, and just a guy going around chasing people and killing them.
What you mentioned about how yours is also a found footage, though, like I said, mine is the one that helped popularize it. You don't really think about Texas Chainsaw Massacre when it comes to the found footage genre. You usually think about Blair Witch or Paranormal Activity, which in and of itself was inspired by Blair Witch. What you said about how basically the sequel showed that there wasn't much for it to stand on in the first place. The sequel was only released 2 years after the first film in the first place. So it's not like it was released towards the end of when found footage was getting destroyed in the first place, because obviously the Paranormal Activity films and everything were still going to go strong. Cloverfield was going to come out. There were plenty of other films that show that found footage is very well on the way up. Meanwhile, the second one, Book of Shadows, it holds a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's just because it's a crap movie. It got nominated for worst blank multiple times. Like, there is actually a list on Wikipedia that you can pull up. And it actually won 2 worst remake or sequel awards in those categories to begin with. Now, I mean, the 2016 film holds a 35%. It's doing a little bit better, but it's not as well received as, say, other films were.
Let's hear some more about Friday the 13th.
Okay, I feel like with Friday the 13th, what really changed was it just sort of changing from sort of just killer movie to just sort of making fun of itself and just getting more like absurd as it went on, to the point that you have Freddy versus Jason, or like you have Jason X where he goes into space to kill a bunch of people from the future. Like, it honestly just, like, that's what people think of when they think of Friday the 13th nowadays. And so I feel like it just really tainted it. And with, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I feel like the sequels, like, their sins are just basically that they're forgettable. Like, not necessarily they ruined
they're
the
forgettable,
franchise.
but it's also because they followed the same plot as the original. Like, people find the Sawyers. The Sawyers take them, and then here comes Grandpa, and Grandpa wants to suck their blood. It happens in every single sequel. But you also have Leatherface coming in and attacking them, like in every slasher movie after it.
Okay. Ooh, some interesting points being brought up here. I'm glad I have a question mark over my head, because, it shows that I'm also, like,
'Cause you're
perplexed and
clueless?
thinking.
I still want that fight after this.
Is the camera's rolling? Can't say what I want to say. Okay, we'll start our 30-second conclusions. We'll start with Carly.
Okay, I feel like Friday the 13th is most destroyed by its sequels because it really just, people think of Friday the 13th and they think of nudity, over the top premise, and just awful, just absurd stuff, and that's what ruined it. And all the other ones are just basically forgettable. That's what's wrong with the other franchises.
Okay, we'll next go to Hunter.
Again, main crux of my argument is just how important Blair Witch was. I honestly think that the sequels didn't really stand much of a chance to begin with due to that sort of impact that Blair Witch had in the first place. Or rather, Blair Witch Project, not the 2016 movie. And honestly, that's why I think that it's probably one of the most influential movies of all time, and it didn't really deserve the sequels that it got in the first place.
Okay, and we'll finish off with Brandon.
Texas Chainsaw started a genre, and that genre was Friday the 13th. It was A Nightmare on Elm Street. The sequels for Texas Chainsaw were the same things as the other movies, and it makes it super forgettable because you needed another genre to push it back because people were getting sick of it to where, no one really remembered the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So when people think of slasher movies, they think of Friday the 13th, they think of A Nightmare on Elm Street, but that was because of Texas Chainsaw.
Okay, any facts to check Vaughn?
Okay, so I can't remember exactly what was said about the Golden Raspberry Awards for worst remake, but I did check out that list, and it looks like 2 Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequels were nominated, and the Blair Witch 2 sequel won one year. So,
Gotcha. Anybody have any thoughts they're dying to share? Yes, Kevin Bacon.
Thanks, man. Or in a
The
baking
joke's
costume.
lost on everybody because they can't see
Yes.
what he's wearing.
In case
I was the guy that jumped out and tried to scare people.
It's
wearing
the
a
guy in the
baking
bacon
costume.
suit.
It's the guy in the bacon. Yeah.
Jaws? I don't know. I feel like Jaws kind of started the whole crappy sequel trend, but I don't know.
Back to the Future.
In terms of like the fight, I think it would have benefited all 3 of the fighters if they spent more time talking about why the initial film is such a classic, and I felt like it was talked too much about just why the sequels after were terrible. But when I think of the one person who may have done that a tad bit more than the others, I think of Brandon, just because I think Texas Chainsaw, he kind of sold it for me when he said the sequels are just rehashes of the plot, because, I don't know, can't get any better, I guess.
Unfortunately, a lot of horror films are like that.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I got thinking to do. Yeah. I want to make sure this gets screen time. My dad made this, by the way. He's a woodworker. Love you, Dad. In case you're watching this, I don't curse that much. I'm sorry I said the F word earlier. I don't think he's gonna watch this, so I'm not that sorry. If I told him to watch it, he would watch it because that's my dad. He's great. Anywho.
I know for a fact
Enough
my
about-
dad's not watching.
Oh, enough about my father. Okay, so I'm going to give first place to Brandon, second place to Carly, third place to Hunter. Brandon, I think Stuart was right. I think you made a good point of saying that Texas Chainsaw Massacre did the most to detract from the original film's iconicism. Nowadays, when people think of slasher horrors, Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't brought up that much. When it first came out, it originally was. Carly, I'm giving you second place because I feel like you did a good job of arguing that the sequels really did kind of derail the entire franchise in terms of ridiculousness and just poor storytelling and character development. And Hunter, I'm going to give you third place because I think you made a very good point in that, it's only taken 2 sequels to already kind of taint the Blair Witch Project, but I just don't think it has been tainted as much as the others have been. Given more sequels and more time, that may happen with the others, but I just feel like it is too little too early at this point. So, to recap, I'm giving first place Brandon, second place Carly, third place Hunter. What does that put the score at?
That leaves Brandon in first with 11 points, Hunter in second with 10 points, and Carly in third with 9 points.
Oh, wow. 11, 10, 9. Okay, so to recap, oh, wow. High scoring hit. Recap. Brandon, first place. Hunter, second place. And Carly, third. And we don't get to use my speed round questions. They were good. Anyway, no, they were. I thought they were pretty good. So thank you all. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Hunter. Thank you, Carly, for a very wonderful Halloween spooky fight. If you have any questions or certain topics you want us to debate, leave us a comment or tell us on our website. And remember to hit that subscribe button if you like today's fight. Share us on social media. I'm Mark Rollins, also known as the Riddler for today. And thank you for watching Cardinal Film Fights.